Hi, everyone. Angela here with Energy Into It. It's my handle here on YouTube. I am here today with Dr. Suzanne Manser, and I'm really excited and quite psyched to bring to you the next edition of Psyched or the next episode of Psyched. This is a collaboration between a Harvard-trained clinical psychologist and Dr. Suzanne Manser, and myself, Angela, a psychic medium, energy healer, intuitive channel, etc., consciousness mentor. And we thought a few months ago that it might be really beneficial to our audiences and to the public at large to discuss things that come up in a psychic's practice and a psychologist's practice, kind of compare notes for similarities and differences. So we're excited to be with you all here today. And today we're going to launch into talking about the hard parts of personal growth and healing. So I think I'll just go ahead and just jump right in and say, hi, Dr. Answer. Do you want to go ahead and jump in and talk about this topic?
Hey Angela, it's good to see you today, as always. I think in light of part of what's going on in the world and the fact that we're all having, well, I shouldn't say all of us, but a lot of us are having some trouble holding all of the emotions that are going on, and there's a lot to manage and heal from just in current stuff, much less all of the stuff we bring in from our own lives. We're having this conversation about how do we help people heal and what are the hard parts? And when Angela and I were talking about this, just prior to doing this recording, Angela asked me to think about, the patients that I work with and think about people who have had trouble letting go of their pain. And while I certainly can think of patients, it also made me think about myself and my own healing journey. And I'm going to use that as a little bit of a background. So I grew up with a mom who was very well-meaning, but an alcoholic and a narcissist. And um, it caused me a lot of pain because she wasn't able to focus on me or respect me or see me in the ways that I wanted. And so it was painful. Um, and because she was who she was, we never had that kind of resolving conversation where she, in my mind, would have apologized and I would have, finally felt like I could let go of all of this pain that I had carried around for years and years and years. That didn't happen. I've done my work. I've let go of a lot of the pain. But in the meantime, there was a period of time when I was carrying this really tender pain and I kind of didn't want to let go of it. And I see that happening with my patients too sometimes, where in part, I think because this pain has almost become a part of us, it's a part of our story, it's a part of our history. And importantly, it's often a part of our story that hasn't really been validated or seen or maybe respected by other people. And so it feels sort of extra, we feel extra almost protective of it. Um, and so, thinking about myself and thinking about people that I work with, I, did therapy and I did my own kind of reflecting and work to try to let go of the pain. But there really was a period of time when I don't know that anybody could have gotten me to let go of it because it actually felt too much a part of myself. And if I think at the time, if I had let go of it somehow, I maybe wouldn't have been sure exactly who I was without it. And so this concept of, somebody comes to me in pain and asks me to help them work with that pain or heal that pain, it's not as simple as taking the pain away or even just making room for it, which is what I talk about a lot. Um, we also have to look a lot of times at what that pain means to the person and what healing it means, because if it means taking it away or making it smaller, that's not always quite as straightforwardly wanted as one would think. So that's just one of the things that comes to mind, Angela, when we talk about challenges in healing, and some of the hardest parts of healing are actually that as much as people want to let go of their pain, there's actually some sort of secondary reason that they might also not want to let go of it.
Fair. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that and witnessing your journey and sharing from your experiences, which is always so valuable. And I think that's one of the best ways that we can help people. Also, like we're doing, is talking about the different tools and things that we use and what we've walked through, because that can help people feel so much better about their own things that they walk through with their own personal growth and healing so much. So as you describe that, I'm remembering that I used to use the phrase when I was earlier in my practice. I've been doing this work for 15 years as a second career. So when I was doing more energy healing and things with people, although we do get to some healing and psychic sessions and such, but less so, to a lesser degree. And what I would say to someone who might have described what you just described is I see us all of us humans, as having a lot of baggage. And so perhaps an approach of pulling it out and unpacking it and repacking it and putting it back on the shelf might be a little bit more apt for some of the largesse of what you were dealing with, as you were healing that really large wound or that big pain point for yourself. It makes me laugh, if nothing else, right? To picture us all kind of rifling through our suitcases if we're going through our stuff and then figuring out how to repack it, perhaps more efficiently, and put it on the shelf. Because you raise a great
Well,
point too. I mean, I don't know if we ever really do let go of these things that are part of who we are in this lifetime.
and that metaphor of repacking it, what I really love about that, and I might steal that, is
Go
that
for it.
you're not trying to get rid of it. You're not necessarily trying to put it somewhere else. You're actually looking at it and taking
Mhm.
each piece and giving it its due. And that I think is part of the first steps of healing a lot of times is, whether someone comes to me or they're just doing the work on their own, but actually being able to take each piece out and almost sort of lovingly say, this was a part of my story, or this is a part of my story. And I'm not just trying to ignore it or get rid of it. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So, one of the things that I talk with my clients about, because I have a lot of clients that'll come to me and they might say, listen, I had this trauma, I've worked through it, I've been to therapy, I've done this, I've done that, I've done psychotherapy for 10 years, whatever, all different stories from all different people. And they'll land on my proverbial doorstep and say, how do I like really release this and get rid of it? I'm having a hard time with that. So and sometimes they'll ask me to kind of look psychically if there's something that ties to that, i.e., a past life thread, right? That's something that's bigger and more beyond than just this lifetime that they're aware of, right? I get into that kind of stuff in my work. And which is akin, I guess, to epigenetics too, that rising field. And what I encourage people to do is utilize what I call internal boundaries, because again, non-trained clinician like yourself, a psychic, not a psychologist. And so I see them as sort of boundaries that we have within ourselves and within our brain, is why I call them internal boundaries. I think everyone has a good understanding of how boundaries are used sort of in relationships and in situations in life. And they tend to, they're here to respect us and to keep us safe and to let people know, almost like rules of engagement in different situations, right? Is how I see boundaries. And these are inside within us, more within ourself. And so I use that because I'll speak from my own experience. I can ruminate a lot. I can really overly focus on things. And that's been who I've been my whole life. And so I really needed to learn how to implement these internal boundaries, because quantum physics teaches us that everything's energy and everything's vibrating, and essentially I'm going to just really distill it here or make it really reductive. We get more of what we focus upon, and I believe that, and I know that through my work. And that's how I was able to sort of say to myself, Angela, you've got to sort of change this and quit dwelling on this pattern of thinking or looping of emotion, revisiting the sad memories of whatever situation. I had a few ahas within myself that, like, oh my gosh, this is where I really get to be empowered and sort out how to deal with this. So I encourage people to consider this, these internal boundaries, and when they're ready, because I think also, both of our practices, of course, are very human centric, whether it's a patient or a client that we're working with, and they've got to be ready to let something go, right? If we're talking about letting go. And so, of course, they've got to be ready for that. And then I say to them, it's okay if you're spending time journaling, thinking about this, talking about this. One of the first internal boundaries I encourage people to utilize is to set a time limit. And I say to them, whether it's 10 minutes or 10 hours, doesn't matter to me. Doesn't need to matter to you either, but hold yourself to that time limit. Could be the first time that they're really bringing more, I'll call it discipline to their internal workings with their thoughts and their emotions. And so, sure, go ahead, think about it all day. But when that timer goes off at 10 hours, I encourage people to have a list of 10 to 20 things to distract them. So things that bring them joy, things they like to do, something that'll be wholly encompassing. And that's different for everybody. But, clean out a kitchen drawer, take a shower, go for a walk, do some breath work or fitness movement if that's, your jam, or go cook a meal or call a friend to talk about something completely different, right? Just have a go-to list of these things that we can do to help our body use these internal boundaries. And then hold that strength of notice if the thought's starting to come back in and send it out, right? Because I do a lot of that kind of work with my clients. Anthropomorphize the thought or the thing and send it away, tell it no, put up an internal boundary, not now, and really just work on that. And that goes for kind of emotions and any other thing that might set someone ruminating, revisiting old photos about the issue or what have you, or hanging out with people that were maybe part of the original infraction that might remind you of it, right? That wouldn't be a good idea when you're trying to hold yourself to, say, that time limit or those more internal boundaries of moving your focus off of the thoughts and emotions and focusing on things that you want to start filling your neural network with, right? And I think that's the other aha is when it's such a joy to witness when clients are like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much this was taking up, how much space this was taking up in my thoughts and my emotions. Of course, I want to think about more fun things or creative things or the future or what I'm, working on, what project I'm working on." So I find that it can be really empowering. It doesn't have to just be sort of a hard discipline conversation with a client.
Angela, it's so funny that you say all of that because the setting a timer and all of that is a tool that I use as well with the idea almost more of make sure that there's make sure that you're setting a timer to think about it and
Mhm.
have that be a time limited situation so that there's lots of time that you're not thinking about it, just like you were saying. And the idea of letting go being not just to focus on the thing that you're letting go, because I think the more, as you said, the more that you focus on it, the more that you get it. So it's harder to let go when you're so intently focused on it. You have to be focused on something else, and you have to be willing to be focused on something else to let go of this other thing. And I think that's the trick that a lot of people get challenged with is it's hard to not focus on the thing you're trying to let go of. So that can be a really good strategy to find something else to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really fun. I'm glad to hear that thank you for that. And I'm glad to hear that you use timer guidance for your patients too. And you just helped raise something for me. I learned a lot about mental health from my first student in the Conscious Psychic program who came to me in 2012, and she was a master's level mental health counselor. She's in spirit now, God rest her soul. But she used to talk to me about how when I would pick her brain about different topics, right, to kind of get her perspective, which is really helpful. And we would both do that a lot. Someone has to be ready, willing, and able to really let go of something. And so I heard you sort of mention that a little bit in the willing piece, right? And I think that can be helpful too, because sometimes you probably encounter this as much as I do, having clients or patients come back and go, "Gosh, I've been trying to let this go and I just can't," right? So then we're sort of talking through it. And I find considering if they're ready, willing, and able is helpful, right? If they're ready, I mean, that's a real personal thing that we've kind of already talked about. And then willing is, are they really willing to do these steps to create this change for themselves? And then able might be that, they require some more tools or maybe some different choices of how they can handle it because what they were trying that we already gave them wasn't working.
Yeah, it's interesting to break it down into those three pieces. And I would be really curious, and I want to think about this, but I'd be really curious if the willing was the sticking point for a lot of people, because I bet a lot of people come in assuming that they're willing, because this thing is really painful. Who would want to hold on to something that's painful? But when you get down to it, for all these reasons, it can just be hard to be willing to let go of it. So, yeah, that's an interesting way to break it down.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you like that. Do you see any other common sticking points or challenges, in your patients with this topic in terms of things that come up and they're having a hard time managing them in this bigger
It's,
letting go process?
yeah. As cliche as it is, I think that one of the topics or one of the things that is a fairly common sticking point is the idea of um, and it's not usually this direct, but the idea of I want everybody else to change. I don't want to have to change.
Mm,
I'm the way I'm doing it is either right or it's just easier if I don't have to change. So why can't it be my partner or my kid or the people I work with or whatever? Which is also fair. I would love it if lots of
totally.
people that'd be great. However, that is not typically the way life works, and so we have to work with what we've got. And
Mhm.
so just even and this all probably comes back to willingness too in a different way, but just the idea of kind of I'm not doing anything wrong, so why is it me who has to sit here doing all this work?
Mhm.
Um, can be a hard one for people to wrap their brains around and come to terms with. And again, it's totally fair. It's not about having done anything wrong. It's not being at fault. It's if it's your pain, it is your responsibility, one way or another, to handle. And that can be heavy, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely. What you've got me thinking about with that is because I've certainly heard that too. And I relate too and share that too. Gosh, I know. Why is it always the people that are, the hard workers that seem to be doing all the
Mhm.
work, even the internal stuff? I would, when I have a client say those kinds of things, I challenge them in a loving and playful way. I challenge them to consider, especially if it's perhaps they're complaining about, say, a spouse or a longer term relationship, someone they've worked with for a long time or a friend for a long time or a family member, right? They know how they are and they know how they're going to be, and they, will maybe part of their unwillingness to let go a little bit or to do the work, I'll use that language, is, they're sure how the other person is going to respond, right? They're anticipating that. And so I try to lovingly challenge them to be in a little bit different state and model some of their newer behavior, i.e., perhaps approaching conversation differently or choosing to not react if they would usually react when the person they're wishing would change says a certain thing, right? So I challenge them to sort of behave a little bit differently and then delight in how the changes they see in the person that they're used to dealing with based upon these patterns of communication. And it almost always amazes people, they'll be like, wow. Or it might not happen the first time, but after they do it a couple of times, it'll elicit, a response from the person. Why are you doing this? You're talking to me differently. Well, because I see things differently now and I'd like to communicate differently, so it can be kind of a door opener for people to have solutions in their relationships based upon the work that they're doing or the letting go that they're doing. Yeah. And I just try to point them to that empowerment of modeling that growth behavior, that personal growth behavior. And, if they're person that they wish would change or they feel they're having a hard time with, um, doesn't want to shift with that, I think it can also really bring a lot of clarity to their situations too. Yeah.
Yep, painful clarity, I imagine, in that kind of a moment. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful.
it's hard to heal. It's not a straightforward process almost ever. And it's feelings and, you know, trauma, capital T, small t, all of the things that cause us pain. It's just complicated. Humans are complicated. And in some ways, I guess maybe it'd be nice if it were, easy and black and white and uncomplicated. But um, I think making room for the complicated, making room for it to be not a straightforward process is really a huge part of the preparation for healing.
Absolutely. Yeah, what that brings up for me is I'm thinking about a few different clients I've had over the years where they might come to me and say, okay, I scheduled an energy healing with you. And I want to go ahead and clear out everything from my fields. My different energetic fields is what I work with in energy healing, mental, emotional bodies, physical, many spiritual bodies. They want to clear everything out of their bodies or their fields all in one fell swoop in an hour. And I say, well, just an hour is not going to do it. Like, I'm not trying to get them to come back for repeated sessions, but I really try to set the tone and say, this isn't a magic wand. And you'll feel lighter and you'll probably feel better about a lot of things. And your perspectives may even shift as a result of the lightening that we're doing with that kind of work, which I don't do anymore one-on-one. But it's often a surprise to them that it isn't sort of a sudden fix. And I have referred a lot of people to therapy. And sometimes what people will say to me is, yeah, but I don't want to spend all that time talking to a therapist because, Angela, you've said the more we focus on it, the more we're going to get it. Like, how does that help? And I'm able to say things to them like, well, talk to the therapist that you're going to talk to about that and let them know that you don't just want to keep talking about the thing that happened because psychologists sit in a great position to be able to see a lot of what patients don't always see, right? So they might point you to something that's holding you back from being able to heal this that you don't even realize they're going to be able to shine a light on for you. So I'm constantly trying to tell people that, talk therapy isn't sort of always how they thought it would be, or every experience isn't the same with, every clinician's different. So maybe if they did dwell a long time with a therapist in the past, it doesn't mean their next therapist will be like that.
So true. And thank goodness that every therapist is different because it
Yeah.
really, I mean, it's so much about fit. And,
Mhm.
it takes a certain kind of person to work with a certain kind of person. And um, personality and therapeutic approach really make a difference.
Absolutely. And I commend all of the humans that are focused on personal healing, self-growth, and all of this, and even the word healing. I mean, I tossed that around. I think you and I both did before this call because it's such an overused word these days too, and I don't want to detract from the really hard work that people do, but it's really hard work and it's a very noble and commendable goal. And I love to work with humans that like to evolve and grow through these things, because I know what's on the other side of it and how good and light people can feel and how shifted people can feel. Yeah,
Yeah. And preparing them, I think, like you're saying, preparing them for what it takes to get to that point can make it a much smoother process.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Any last tips for our audience today, Suzanne, before we close?
I don't think so. I just want to, as you said, repeat and reflect the idea that healing is absolutely possible, whatever healing may mean to you, that lightening the load and kind of making more of an intentional decision about what you want to be focusing on and what you want to be carrying kind of front and center is absolutely possible. And there are so many different formats and venues for making those shifts. Um, Therapy and your world being just two of them, but recognizing that, again, nobody is static, nobody's brain is static, nobody's psychology is static. It's all changeable, it's all malleable. And the more intentional focus you put on it, the more you will get out of it.
Absolutely. Love that. Thank you so much, Suzanne. This has been our latest episode of Psyched. And thank you all who are here. We appreciate you giving our channels a subscribe, giving the video a like if it was beneficial to you, and please feel free to share it with anyone that may benefit. And we will see you on the next episode. Bye.